My name is Lena Hayes, and if you'd asked me 3 months ago what my biggest worry was, I'd have said it was whether my presentation slides for the quarterly board meeting had the right shade of navy blue. Back then, I still believed in loyalty, in playing by the rules, in the idea that hard work and integrity would eventually be rewarded. I was the Senior VP of Product Innovation at Viridian Dynamics, a sleek, glass and steel tech firm that prided itself on disrupting the future while quietly choking the life out of anyone who didn't fit the mold of polished conformity. I'd built the company's flagship AI platform from nothing. Late nights, skipped birthdays, panic attacks in airport bathrooms. I'd given Viridian everything. And for years, I thought that mattered. Until the morning of the board meeting, when I walked into my office to find 2 security guards and a man I barely recognized holding a cardboard box. "Lena Hayes," the man said, adjusting his too-tight suit. "HR regrets to inform you that your employment with Viridian Dynamics has been terminated, effective immediately." I blinked. "What? Why?" "Company policy," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Please gather your personal items. You have 5 minutes." My desk was already half empty. My laptop gone. My access badge deactivated. Even my favorite coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle I'd had since grad school, was missing. They'd cleaned me out like I was a ghost before I'd even left the building. I stood there, hard hammering, watching the guards hover like vultures. This wasn't just a firing. It was an erasure. And I knew exactly who'd ordered it. Daniel Reeves, our CEO, the man who'd patted me on the back last week and said, "Lena, you're the backbone of this company." The same man who'd been quietly undermining me for months, feeding the board half-truths about my instability, my unrealistic timelines, my emotional volatility. All because I refused to greenlight his pet project, a surveillance AI that scraped private data without consent. I called it unethical. He called it the future. And now, he cut me loose right before the board meeting where I was supposed to present the real numbers, the ones that showed his grand vision was bleeding cash and alienating customers. I left the building without a word. No dramatic speech. No tears. Just the click of my heels on marble and the hollow echo of my own disbelief. Outside, the San Francisco fog rolled in thick and gray, like the city itself was mourning for me. But grief didn't last long. By the time I reached my apartment, something else had taken root. Not anger, not yet, but a cold, sharp clarity. They thought they'd buried me. But I wasn't dead. I was just getting started. I spent the next 48 hours in a caffeine-fueled haze, digging through old emails, encrypted files, and cloud backups I'd kept hidden from corporate IT. I'd always been paranoid, smart paranoia, the kind that keeps you alive in shark-infested waters. And thank God for it, because buried in a folder labeled Personal Recipes was everything I needed: financial discrepancies, internal memos showing Daniel had knowingly misled investors, and worst of all, proof he'd funneled millions into offshore accounts under shell companies tied to his brother-in-law. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. The board loved Daniel. He was charming, silver-tongued, and most importantly, had convinced them he was irreplaceable. I needed more than receipts. I needed leverage. That's when I remembered the shareholder agreement. Viridian wasn't just any company. It was built on a unique governance structure. The founding charter, drafted by the original CEO, a woman named Miriam Cho who'd been pushed out years before I joined, contained a clause almost no one remembered. Section 7.3. In the event of gross misconduct or breach of fiduciary duty by the CEO, a majority of Class A shareholders could call for an emergency vote to remove him and appoint an interim leader. And who held the largest block of Class A shares? Not Daniel. Not the board. Me. I'd inherited them from Miriam. She'd been my mentor, my quiet champion. When she left, she transferred her shares to me with a note that read, "For when they try to burn the house down, don't let them." I kept them secret. Never exercised voting rights. Never even mentioned them. I thought it was just a gesture. A symbolic passing of a torch. Turns out, it was a loaded gun. I called my lawyer, then my most trusted former colleagues, people Daniel had also sidelined or silenced. Marco from engineering. Priya from legal. Javier from customer success. All of them had stories. All of them were furious. And all of them still had access to internal systems. We moved fast. Quietly. Like shadows. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need an invitation. I had a plan. Thursday morning arrived with a cruel kind of sunshine. I put on my sharpest black suit, the one I'd worn to my first executive presentation, and walked back into Viridian Tower like I owned the place. Because in a way, I did. Security tried to stop me at the lobby. "Ms. Hayes, you're not authorized." I'm a Class A shareholder, I said, flashing my stock certificate on my phone. And I'm here for the board meeting. Per Section 7.3 of the Founding Charter, I have the right to attend any meeting where executive leadership is under review. The guard blinked, checked his tablet, swallowed hard. Go ahead. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to my own execution, or resurrection. I wasn't sure which. When the doors opened, the hallway was quiet. Too quiet, but I could hear voices behind the double doors of the boardroom. Daniel's voice, smooth and confident. And with Lena gone, we can finally move forward unencumbered by sentimentality. I pushed the doors open. Silence. Every head turned. 12 board members. Daniel at the head of the table, mid-sentence, frozen like a deer in headlights. His smile faltered, then vanished. Lena, he said, voice tight. What are you doing here? I'm here, I said, stepping inside and letting the door swing shut behind me, because you fired the wrong person. I walked to the empty chair at the far end of the table, the one usually reserved for the CEO's assistant. I didn't sit. I placed my tablet on the polished wood and tapped the screen. Instantly, the massive display on the wall lit up, not with my old product slides, but with documents, emails, bank transfers, internal audit reports. Daniel's face went pale. You can't just. I can, I said, because I hold 28% of Class A voting shares. And under Section 7.3, that gives me the right to call for an emergency vote on your removal. One of the board members, an older woman named Eleanor Vance, leaned forward. Lena, is this true? It's all there, I said. Daniel's been cooking the books, misleading investors. And worse, he approved the deployment of Project Nightingale, the surveillance AI, despite knowing it violated GDPR and CCPA. He even told engineering to bypass our ethics review board, all while telling you the product was customer first. Marco stood up from the back of the room. He'd been waiting in the hallway per our plan. I can confirm that, he said. I have the internal Slack logs, the override codes, everything. Priya stepped in next. And I have the legal risk assessment we drafted, buried by Daniel because it said we'd face class action lawsuits within 6 months. Javier added, our churn rate has doubled since Nightingale launched. Customers are fleeing. We're losing enterprise contracts daily. Daniel shot to his feet. This is a witch hunt. Lena's bitter because she was let go. She's fabricating. No, I said, cutting him off. My voice was calm, steady. I'm not bitter. I'm just done pretending. I turned to the board. You have a choice. You can keep a CEO who lied to your faces, broke the law, and is steering this company into a legal and financial iceberg. Or you can vote to remove him right now and appoint an interim leader who actually cares about Viridian's future, not just his own bonus. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Eleanor spoke first. I move we hold a vote. A second board member nodded. Then a third. Daniel looked around, desperate. You can't do this. I built this company. No, I said softly. Miriam Cho built this company. You just rented it. The vote was quick. Unanimous. Daniel was removed on the spot. And then Eleanor turned to me. Lena, who do you propose as interim CEO? I didn't hesitate. Me. Gasps. Murmurs. Doubt flickered in some eyes. But not all. You were just fired, someone said. And now I'm the largest Class A shareholder, I replied. I know this company inside and out. I built its core product. I understand its values, real values, not the ones printed on lobby posters. And I have a plan to fix what Daniel broke. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. All in favor. Hands rose, one by one, until every single board member had voted yes. Daniel stood there, stunned, as security was called. Not for me this time, but for him. He gathered his things in silence, refusing to look at me. But as he passed, he whispered, This isn't over. Maybe it wasn't. But as I sat down in the CEO's chair, the same one he'd occupied just minutes before, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. Not naive hope, not blind optimism, but the fierce, hard-won kind that comes from knowing you've stared down the abyss and refused to blink. The board meeting resumed. We had damage to assess, fires to put out, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, Viridian had a chance to be what it was always meant to be. And I was going to make sure it happened. Outside, the fog had lifted. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the bay. I took a deep breath. This wasn't revenge. It was responsibility, and I was ready to carry it. But as I scrolled through the urgent messages flooding my new CEO inbox, one thing became clear. Taking the throne was only the beginning. The real battle, the one to save Viridian's soul, was just getting started. The first week as interim CEO felt like walking through a minefield in bare feet. Every step deliberate, every breath measured. But I didn't flinch. I called an all-hands meeting on Monday morning and stood in front of every employee who'd once watched me get escorted out like a criminal. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them the truth. Viridian had lost its way. Ethics had been traded for expediency. People had been sacrificed for optics. And I'd let it happen until I couldn't anymore. Then I told them what came next. We were pulling Project Nightingale offline immediately. No exceptions. We'd issue a public apology to our users, offer full data deletion, and partner with independent auditors to rebuild trust. I reinstated the Ethics Review Board with real authority, not just a rubber stamp. And I announced a new initiative, Viridian Rebuilt, a company-wide effort to redesign our products around transparency, user consent, and human dignity. The room was silent at first. Then someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. Not because I was CEO, but because I'd finally given them back their pride. Over the next 3 months, we worked like mad. Engineers rewrote code. Legal teams drafted new privacy frameworks. Customer support reps stayed late to personally call clients we'd wronged. And I made a point to eat lunch in the cafeteria, listen to concerns in open forums, and remember every name I could. Leadership wasn't about corner offices, it was about showing up. The board watched closely. Some were skeptical. Others, like Eleanor, became quiet allies. She'd pull me aside after meetings and say things like, "Miriam would be proud," or "You're doing what none of us had the courage to do." Then came the quarterly earnings call, the first since Daniel's ouster. Investors were nervous. Analysts predicted doom. But when I walked onto the virtual stage, I didn't hide the losses. I owned them. Then I showed our path forward, a leaner product line, renewed partnerships with ethical tech coalitions, and early data showing customer retention climbing back up. To everyone's shock, including mine, the stock rose 12% that day. 6 months in, the board held a special session. Not to question me, but to offer me the permanent CEO role. No interim, no caveats, just a unanimous vote and a handshake. I accepted, but only on one condition, that we amend the company charter to include employee representation on the board and enshrine ethical AI principles into our corporate DNA. They agreed without hesitation. The real victory came a year later. I stood on a sun-drenched stage in Austin at the Global Tech for Good Summit, accepting an award for corporate integrity and innovation. Behind me on the screen was a short film showing Viridian's transformation. Engineers working with civil rights groups, customers testifying about regained trust, kids using our reimagined education platform in underserved schools. After the speech, a young woman approached me, eyes wide. "Ms. Hayes," she said, voice trembling, "I interned here last summer. I used to think tech was broken beyond repair. But watching you, you made me believe it could be different." I smiled. It's not me. It's all of us refusing to look away. That night, I went back to my apartment. Not the sleek downtown loft I'd had during my VP days, but a quieter place near the water, with books stacked on the floor and a cat named Juno who'd adopted me during the chaos. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and typed a long overdue email to Miriam Cho. "Dear Miriam, *, you were right. They tried to burn the house down. But we didn't just save it, we rebuilt it stronger. Thank you for trusting me with the keys. *. I hit send, then walked out onto the balcony. The city glittered below, alive and imperfect and full of possibility. Daniel never came back. Rumor had it he'd launched a crypto startup in Dubai that collapsed within a year. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. His legacy was ash. Mine was growing. Viridian wasn't perfect. We still made mistakes. But now we owned them. We learned. We changed. And every morning, when I walked into that glass tower, no longer as an outsider, but as its steward, I remembered the woman who'd been marched out with a cardboard box. She wasn't erased. She was reborn. Because sometimes, the deepest betrayals carve the space for your truest self to rise. And when you do, when you lead not with ego, but with empathy, integrity, and relentless hope, you don't just take back your seat at the table. You rebuild the whole damn table. And invite everyone to sit. The sun was warm on my face as I stood on the rooftop garden of Viridian's new headquarters, smaller, greener, and built with reclaimed materials, just like the company itself. Below, the city hummed with life, but up here it was quiet. Peaceful. The kind of quiet that only comes after a storm has passed, and you finally let yourself breathe. It had been 2 years since the day I was fired. 2 years since I walked back in and changed everything, not just for the company, but for myself. Viridian wasn't just surviving now. It was thriving. Our ethical AI platform had become the gold standard in the industry. We partnered with schools, nonprofits, and even governments, not to surveil but to serve. And last quarter, for the first time in company history, our employee satisfaction score hit 94%. People didn't just work here. They believed in what we were building. I kept my promise to Miriam. Her name now graced the innovation lab on the 10th floor, the Miriam Cho Center for Ethical Technology. Every new hire spent their first week there, learning not just how to code, but how to care. And me. I still sat in the CEO's chair, but I'd redesigned it. Literally. No more cold leather and steel. Now it was wood, cushioned, human. Just like leadership should be. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Marco. Asterisk, team lunch in 10. Priya brought her famous dumplings. Don't be late. Asterisk. I smiled. We still ate together every Friday. No hierarchy. Just people who'd fought for something better, and won. As I turned to head downstairs, I paused by the garden's edge. A small plaque was embedded in the stone railing, almost hidden by ivy. I'd put it there on the 1-year anniversary of my return. It read, "This company belongs to those who refuse to look away." I touched the words lightly, then walked inside. Down in the atrium, laughter echoed. Employees mingled, engineers, designers, customer support, even interns, sharing food, ideas, and stories. No one wore suits unless they wanted to. No one feared speaking up. And when I entered the room, no one stood or clapped out of obligation. But someone waved. Someone else called out, "Lena, save me a dumpling." I grabbed a plate, sat cross-legged on the floor like everyone else, and passed the soy sauce to a nervous new intern. "First week?" I asked. She nodded wide-eyed. "It's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A corporate fortress," she admitted. "Cold. Impersonal." I grinned. "We used to be. But we decided people matter more than polish." She smiled back, tentatively at first, then fully. And in that moment I saw it, the future. Not shiny or perfect, but real. Kind. Human. Later that evening I walked home. No driver, no security detail, just me and the evening light. My apartment was modest now. I'd sold the fancy car, donated half my bonus to a tech access nonprofit, and adopted a second cat. Juno tolerated her, barely. I made tea, opened the window, and watched the sunset paint the sky in gold and rose. No emails. No crisis calls. Just stillness. And for the first time in my life, I felt not just successful, but whole. I hadn't set out for revenge. I'd only wanted to do what was right. But in doing so, I'd found something I never knew I needed: belonging. Purpose. Peace. Viridian was healed. And so was I. The world still had its shadows, its greedy CEOs, its broken systems. But here, in this little corner we'd rebuilt together, there was light. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.